morning. In today's class we will consider the case of atmospheric dispersion. The dispersion of gases in the atmosphere becomes important in cases wherein we have some leak of either a vapor or a volatile liquid, and this volatile liquid or vapor is carried forward. Maybe at the point of the leak it gets mixed with air partially and it gets transported by the atmosphere, maybe by the wind, by other means, maybe due to the initial velocity, it gets dispersed and forms an explosive cloud, and an explosion could occur because of this particular dispersion of the fuel gas. Therefore, to be able to get into atmospheric dispersion and formation of explosions due to the dispersion of the vapor, fuel vapor, and also maybe the gases and also pollutants to some extent, we need to understand what an atmosphere is about. We'll take a look at it. You have the earth, you have maybe the sun far away, and the heat from the sun goes and heats the earth. That means you have radiation from the sun coming onto the earth, and you have something like incoming solar radiation. That means incoming solar radiation, and this incoming solar radiation is spoken of as insolation. We will get into the details shortly. And what this incoming solar radiation does is it heats the surface of the earth, and the air above the surface of the earth gets into motion, and let's try to take a look and what this atmosphere is about. I show in a slide, and in a slide I will start with showing the temperature on the x axis, and on the y axis the altitude from the surface of the earth. Let's see what the distribution of the temperature is. On the x axis, as I was just telling, I show the temperature in degrees centigrade, and on the y axis, namely what is shown by Z in kilometers, I show the temperature. Now, the surface of the earth gets heated by the radiation from the sun, and therefore the surface of the earth is a little warmer, and it heats the layer adjacent to the earth by conduction, with the result maybe as we go higher above the surface of the earth, the temperature drops. This temperature drops till an altitude of around 10 to 15 kilometers. See, this is just an indication because the temperature distribution changes at different places at different times. Therefore, if I say that the surface of the earth is around, let's say, 35 degrees centigrade or so, maybe the air above the surface of the earth gets cooled to a height of around 10 to 15 kilometers, and around 10 to 12 kilometers is the height at which maybe a jet aircraft flies. Therefore, the temperature keeps dropping until a height of around 10 to 12 kilometers or 10 to 15 kilometers. The temperature typically is around -50 to -60 degrees centigrade. The air above the surface of the earth, the pressure also falls, and the region of the air for which the temperature drops is known as troposphere, or the rotating atmosphere above the surface of the earth. When we go to heights above, let's say 10 to 15 kilometers, till a height of around 50 kilometers, well, the temperature begins to increase again. The question is, why should it increase? You have ozone in this particular zone. Ozone absorbs sunlight and liberates heat, and therefore the temperature increases, and the temperature increases to approximately something like -60 or -55 degrees centigrade to around 7 degrees centigrade to a height of around 50 kilometers. The zone in which the temperature increases is known as a stratosphere, and the region of the distinguishing troposphere and stratosphere is known as tropopause. Now, above the stratosphere, that is above 50 kilometers, the temperature falls again. This is because there is hardly any molecules of air left, and therefore the radiation does not heat the medium through which it travels, so it only heats the earth over here, and therefore the temperature falls, and the temperature falls to an altitude of almost something like 90 to 100 kilometers. But above this particular altitude, you have a small number of molecules of, let us say, O2 and O, or which absorb some photon energy, which absorb some radiation from the sun, and these things react and they have something like a higher temperature. But this temperature is a notional temperature, because we are talking of something wherein the mean free path is very large. It is difficult to talk in terms of a continuum temperature. But if we view this particular zone from maybe places where the sky is very clear, such as in the very northern regions and the very southern regions, we will find that we can see the picturesque display of these molecules getting heated. Something like an aurora can be seen, and therefore we can say, well, the temperature distribution above the surface of the earth, initially the temperature falls to an altitude of around 10 to 15 kilometers in the troposphere, then it increases in the stratosphere, then again it falls in the mesosphere. The distinction between mesosphere and stratosphere, the region is known as stratopause, and thereafter in the region further away, well, the temperature increases, you have the ions over here, and this is also known as ionosphere. And this ionosphere is used for reflecting maybe the radio waves, whatever it is, could be reflected from the ionosphere. Therefore, this is the temperature distribution, and mind you, maybe all parts of the earth are not uniformly heated, with the result maybe some place on the earth is more heated than the other, and whenever some part is more heated, you could also have wind. Well, this wind need not always be steady. It could have something like a gust of wind could be available. And further, it's also possible, let me go back to the board. Supposing I have something like the surface of the earth over here. Now I show it as a flat surface. We said, well, the temperature drops. Well, the temperature drops over here, and we are really interested in a region near to the surface of the earth. That means we are looking at the atmospheric boundary layer. This region could extend to something like maybe some 300 to 500 meters away, and maybe because of the heating of the earth, the temperature drops. And supposing we have a cloud in the sky, what is going to happen? It is going to prevent the incoming solar radiation heating some parts. Therefore, maybe some part may be cool, some part may be hot, and therefore I have wind, because when something is hot, the air rises, and therefore I have a wind. This wind need not be a steady, it could be turbulent, maybe u is equal to u plus u prime, it could be a gust of wind, there could be a shear in the wind, and also therefore the cloud influences the heating. The wind also, when wind takes place, well, it is also going to influence the heating, and therefore let us take a look at effect of not only the incoming solar radiation, but also the cloud cover and the wind effects. To be able to put that, in this slide, I also talk in terms of the incoming solar radiation, that is IN, SOLA, TION, and incoming solar radiation in atmospheric dispersion is talked as insolation. Insolation means incoming solar radiation. Having said that, let's take a look at how this temperature distributes. Like I have a hot day, let us say. During a hot day, as we just now talked, and we are talking of maybe the layer adjacent to the earth over a distance of 500 meters, and to be very specific, we are talking in a region somewhere near the surface of the earth within the troposphere. And when I look at this particular region, well, the temperature keeps dropping, because during the daytime the insolation heats the surface of the earth, and typically the value of the gradient of temperature with respect to the height is something like 5 to 9.8 degrees centigrade per kilometer. When the air is very dry, the value of this gradient is larger. When you have humid air, well, what does humidity do? See, humidity absorbs some heat, with the result the gradient decreases. Therefore, when I have a lot of humidity, the gradient is small. When I have less humidity, the gradient is large, and this gradient is spoken of as lapse rate. By lapse rate, we mean the temperature gradient. Well, this is how the temperature changes because of the radiation. But supposing I were to think in terms of a night, let us say a cold winter night. See, when I talk in terms of something like a night, there is no insulation, and supposing let us say air is cold, the surface of the earth gets quite cold, and therefore it cools the layer of the air adjacent to the earth, with the result the temperature gradient, the temperature no longer drops as the height increases, but the temperature increases still. Maybe at some distance away it merges with the routine way of temperature decreasing with altitude, but near the surface of the earth, well, the temperature increases. In other words, instead of having a gradient which is negative here, I start getting a positive gradient, and this particular phenomenon of temperature increasing upward along the upward from the surface of the earth is spoken of as temperature inversion. Well, all these things are within the atmospheric boundary layer, and therefore it is possible for us to have during the daytime, well, the temperature decreasing above the surface from the surface of the earth, and during night time, especially on a cold winter night, well, that temperature increases. Now, in addition to maybe we have this radiation from the sun, maybe absence of radiation at night, we also have, we just now said cloud cover, we could also have wind. And what would be the effect of wind? Say during the daytime when there is no wind at all, this is the gradient. When there is wind, the wind is going to decrease the gradient, rather the gradient would come down. And at night, if I have wind, well, I will not have such a gradient, maybe the gradient will be little less over here, or let us say that the positive gradient will be influenced just the same way as the negative gradient is influenced. Again, if I have the cloud above us, well, the cloud during daytime changes this temperature, and therefore the gradient is going to be affected. If I have at night a cloud above the surface of the earth, what is going to happen? Well, the cloud emits radiation, and therefore maybe the temperature at the surface is going to go up and the gradient is going to come down. Therefore, let us put down the effect of the cloud and the wind effects on the temperature distribution. And if I were to do that, well, the effect of cloud and wind on the negative gradient, that is the negative lapse rates or the lapse rates as it is to make it by the dotted line instead of having a straight line, and also instead of having a temperature inversion, well, the amount of inversion slightly changes over here. Therefore, both the wind and the cloud cover reduces the lapse rate, and not only does it reduce the lapse rate during daytime, it also reduces the insulation, because the cloud partially blocks the radiation which comes onto the surface of the earth. Well, these are the characteristics of, let us say, the temperature distribution. But what is it we are interested in? See, we want to somehow correlate the temperature distribution, the cloud, the wind with respect to the dispersion. If I have something like a leak on the surface of some gases forming, some explosive gases being formed, how does it mix? To what extent does a cloud of an explosive gas mixture is formed? And that is what we want to do. To be able to do that, let us now focus on the problem of something like a parcel of gas. Let us consider, I go to the board and work out this particular issue. Let us assume that this is the surface of the earth over here. Let us say I have a parcel of gas, and that is what was shown in this slide. The parcel of gas is of volume V, it has a density rho p. I am just interested in motion of this parcel of gas due to the temperature gradient above the surface of the earth. We said, well, the temperature gradient could either be negative just above the surface of the earth, or it could also be positive in case we have temperature inversion taking place. Now, the mass of this parcel of gas, that is, mass is equal to volume into density, and this mass is attracted by the gravitational force. Therefore, I have a downward acceleration corresponding to mg, which is equal to rho p into V into G. Now, this parcel of gas is going to displace some amount of air, and denoting the density of air by rho A. Now, the volume of air displaced is V, rho A is the ambient density, and therefore, I have a buoyancy force corresponding to rho A into volume into G, which is the buoyancy force. I have the force with which maybe the parcel of gas is attracted towards the earth is W, and if I presume that this parcel of gas is going to be moved by buoyancy, let us presume that maybe the density of air is greater than this, or greater than the density of this parcel. Well, I have the buoyancy force exceeding my gravitational force, namely weight, and the acceleration of this parcel of gas corresponds to mass into acceleration of this parcel of gas is equal to the buoyancy force minus the weight of this particular parcel of gas, and mass of the gas is equal to rho p into V, density of the parcel of gas into volume of the gas, into alpha is equal to the buoyancy force, which is equal to rho A into V into G, which is the buoyancy force, minus the force with which the parcel is attracted by the gravitational field, namely mg, which is the weight, which is equal to rho p into V into G. I solve this for the acceleration, and mind you, I am thinking of an acceleration which is being pushed up, because I have taken rho A corresponding to buoyancy over here, and the weight rho p corresponding to the density of your parcel on the with a negative sign over here. And what is it I get? I get alpha is equal to, I get V and V get cancelled on both the sides. I have rho A minus rho p divided by rho p into G over here. Well, this is the acceleration, upward acceleration of the parcel of gases when I have the density of the air exceeding the parcel, or supposing now I consider a particular case. I consider the case wherein I am in the region near the surface of the earth, and what is happening? Rho is equal to PV is equal to MRT, or rho is equal to P by RT, and therefore, in the region very near to the surface of the earth, the variation of pressure is not that high, or taking the pressure as constant, I can also write this upward acceleration as equal to, since the pressure is near constant, I can write it as 1 over temperature of air minus 1 over temperature of the parcel of gas divided by 1 over temperature of parcel of gas, and this gives me the value as maybe the temperature of the parcel of gas minus T A divided by T A is the value of the upward acceleration. And therefore, let us take a look at this particular one, and this is what I show here. I took alpha as multiplied by G, and therefore, I will have G over here, this is G over here, and therefore, I get alpha is equal to T p minus T a divided by T a into the value of G. This is the upward acceleration. Therefore, we find that, well, when I have a parcel of gas, it can drift upwards when I have the temperature. Let us take a look at temperature, but before that we take a look at density. When the density of air is greater than the density of this particular parcel of gas, it moves up, and accordingly when the temperature of the parcel of gas is higher than the temperature of the air, well, it gets pushed upwards. Therefore, let us take one more look at it. We talked in terms of this parcel of gas being pushed up or pushed down. Let us take a look at this particular problem. First, we analyze it. Supposing we have the surface of the earth, I have the temperature gradient, which is, let us say, negative, dt by dz is negative. That means, as I move up in the z direction, Ta, temperature of air, decreases. Then what is going to happen to this particular acceleration? Acceleration depends on the parcel of gas minus Ta. As I move up the temperature decreases and therefore, the alpha keeps increasing. That is, the acceleration of the parcel of gas keeps increasing as it moves up because of the negative temperature gradient. But supposing I am talking in terms of temperature inversion, wherein instead of having a negative gradient, mind you, here I have, maybe I showed temperature like this is my altitude Z, and that is why I show this in this particular case. Supposing I talk in terms of a positive gradient, that means I have temperature along this, the altitude here I have positive, that is the temperature increases. What is going to happen? Well, the temperature increases and therefore, what is going to happen? You know, if the temperature is increasing over here, well, and if it happens to be higher than the temperature of the parcel of gas, well, the parcel can no longer move up, it is pushed down. Therefore, whenever we have temperature inversion, what is happening is the upward acceleration of the parcel of gas, whenever I have during daytime, I talk in terms of the dt by dz decreasing, that is temperature decreasing upward, well, the parcel of gas accelerates up. Whereas, if I have temperature inversion and the temperature above the surface of the earth, let us say here this is temperature, well, this is Z, temperature is positive. If temperature is positive, well, the downward, the parcel of gas, once it shifts up, it is pushed downward, and therefore, a gas cannot leave the earth's surface, but it is pushed back onto the surface of earth. Therefore, we find that whenever we talk in terms of dt by dz being negative, such as it happens when the surface is heated by the sun, well, a parcel of gas on the surface of the earth accelerates up and it goes up and it gets lost. When I have dt by dz is positive, such as when I have temperature inversion, well, a parcel of gas, even if it initially moves up, or the parcel of gas can just not move up, it is always pushed back to the ground. That means thing accumulates on the ground itself. If I have dt by dz is equal to 0, well, there is no motion to the parcel of the gas. Therefore, the temperature gradient above the surface of the earth within the atmospheric boundary layer decides whether a parcel or some leak or some parcel of gas which is formed, well, it will get lost to the upward or it will come back, and this is what is mainly used to be able to say whether the atmosphere is stable, unstable, and or neutral. We say that the atmosphere is stable when the gas is pushed back to the original point because I have temperature inversion. We say that the temperature is unstable, the atmosphere is unstable when the temperature gradient is negative. That means the earth is heated by insulation and the temperature keeps decreasing along the surface, and therefore, we say, well, it is the parcel of gas escapes from the surface of the earth, and when I have neutral, well, the lapse rate or the gradient is 0, and therefore, there is no movement of this. Therefore, the atmospheric stability is defined as stable, unstable, or neutral according to whether the gradient, let us go back and see what it is. If I have a negative gradient, we say atmosphere is unstable. If I have a temperature inversion or a positive gradient, the atmosphere is stable, and this is mainly what decides whether there is going to be some accumulation of vapor on the surface of the earth. Let's take one typical example. You know, we had the great smog of London on December 5, 1952. This was a very severe cold month in London, and what happened is, you know, being very cold, you know, people wanted to keep themselves warm, and therefore they burned more coal to generate heat, and they kept themselves warm. The wind was almost 0, with the result, you know, you had something like a very stable atmosphere. Let's go back to this. Well, you had a large temperature gradient and the wind was low. That means I have a huge temperature gradient along the surface of the earth. And what this did was, since there was no wind and low temperature, because of the temperature inversion, the carbon monoxide and other gases which got generated could just not leave the earth, they kept collecting over the surface of the earth. Maybe carbon monoxide has a molecular mass of 28 gram per mole, which is almost similar to what nitrogen or air has, around 28.8 gram per mole. With the result, the pollutant gases settled on the ground, and this pollutant gas entered the homes, and something like 12,000 people died because of this particular Great Smog of London. Therefore, we find, well, there is a collection of the gases on the surface of the earth whenever we have something like a stable atmosphere. We would like to use these stable, unstable, neutral atmospheres to be able to see the dispersion of gases in the atmosphere. Let us go further. You know, a very famous meteorologist by name Pascal, what he did was he classified the atmosphere into different categories, and this classification again becomes important. Let us take one particular example of it. We said, well, the wind affects the insulation, the wind affects the gradient. Even if we have something like we have temperature inversion, the wind affects it. And therefore, you know, whenever we talk of atmosphere, it's very difficult to work with a precise number. We cannot say, well, the gradient is so much. Therefore, what Pascal did was, he said, well, anyway, I can talk in terms of a stable atmosphere, I can talk in terms of an unstable atmosphere. Unstable means I have such things which are able to escape out. I am also able to talk in terms of a neutral atmosphere. With stable atmosphere, can I talk in terms of very stable atmosphere, like we had in the case of the Great Smog of London, temperature inversion and everything settling on the surface, very stable. Similarly, unstable, I can talk in terms of very unstable, like maybe in summer months, maybe in Chennai we have very hot sun midday striking on us, with the result, well, the temperature gradient above the surface of the earth is quite negative. Or can I talk in terms of neutral? When I talk of very stable, I can also talk of moderately stable. I can also talk in terms of, let's say, little less, maybe slightly unstable, slightly stable. Similarly, I can talk of maybe moderately stable, which means it's not that hot. Maybe the sun is at an inclination. When I have the surface of the earth, the sun is directly above my head, well, the insulation is the largest. If I have the sun at an angle, well, the insulation is little less over here, and therefore, maybe I can talk in terms of moderate, and also I can talk of slightly unstable. Well, the slightly stable, slightly unstable corresponds to near the neutral zone, and in addition to the insulation, maybe at midday, if I have a cloud above the surface of the earth, well, the insulation does not affect me directly, and therefore, the cloud cover makes my unstable characteristic into moderate. Therefore, whenever we can characterize the atmosphere in terms of, let us say, highly unstable, highly stable, and these are the two extremes. What he did was, he said the very stable, highly stable, he calls it as highly unstable, I am sorry, he calls it as A, very stable, he calls it as F, and in between A and F, you have 4 other categories, and you have 5 other categories, and those could be, well, it could be moderately stable, he calls it as E, it could be slightly stable, calls it as D. Well, it is very stable, very unstable, I should have written over here, very unstable. Very unstable, he calls it as A, moderately stable as B, and moderately unstable as C. Well, D and C, which are slightly stable and slightly unstable, are very near to neutral. Therefore, he catalogued the atmosphere into something like A category, B category, C category, which were unstable, maybe D, E and F, which were stable. F is very stable, A is highly unstable, and this is his classification. And therefore, if I were to look at his classification, I find, well, F is most stable, A is most unstable, E is moderately stable, B is moderately unstable, and D and C are slightly stable and slightly unstable, and these are near to neutral. Why is this classification required? The point is, it is very difficult to precisely, as I was saying, work out a number, and therefore, maybe I could examine if the conditions of my system or my atmosphere are such that it is most unstable, I am bound to retain the explosive gas on the surface of the earth, whereas if it is most unstable, well, it might diffuse out. Therefore, let us try to relate it to the explosion which we want to study. Well, before that, let me put down the effect of the wind and cloud coverage also. Like for instance, I have surface wind, which is a very small wind of the order of less than 2 meters per second. I have insolation, midday the sun is vertically above me. Well, I have very unstable because I have very strong dt by dz, which is negative. Whereas at night, when I have low wind and maybe it is a cold winter night, there is hardly any cloud cover is less than 3 by 8 of the total region above me, I say, well, it is most unstable. If I say, well, the insolation is such that the sun is at an angle, I have moderate one between A and B. If the insolation is slight here, because I am a very cloudy day, not much heat is, not much insolation is there, I have B. Therefore, when I have low surface winds, I could have, well, a strong insolation leading to very unstable atmosphere A, and at night, a cold winter night, I could have F. But if the sky is overcast, well, the infrared radiation from the cloud heats my earth, and therefore, it becomes slightly less stable at E. Similarly, let us go to the opposite case wherein I have very high wind speed, and what does the wind speed do? As we saw that the wind speed changes the lapse rate above the surface of the earth. Well, the unsteadiness A becomes an unsteadiness C, moderate becomes D, it becomes almost D over here. That means the insulation is so small that it is something like slightly stable over here, and at night when I have large wind, well, it is almost like slightly stable because I am not able to get the decreasing gradient over here. Therefore, when I have high wind conditions, I have something like almost near neutral or slightly stable, and for the intermediate cases of wind between 2 to 3, well, A changes through A to B, AB changes to B, that is, it is between A and B for moderate, it now becomes B, for slight it becomes C, and so on. We have this particular case. Therefore, once I know what is my surface wind condition, I know what is the type of the insulation, that is, whether the sun is vertically above me, whether there are clouds above me, I can fix the category of the atmosphere as either A, B, C, D, E, or in between A and B, in between B and C, or in between C and D. Using these particular classification between A and F and the regions A, B, B, C, that is the border zones, I want to work out what is the type of dispersion we get in practice. I think we want to find out how an explosive gas disperses, and that is what we do in today's class. What we have done is, we now know how to represent the stability of the atmosphere as being highly unstable or highly stable, and what are the different categories of the stable and unstable atmospheres. When we apply it, people keep asking what is the relevance to explosions of these atmospheric stability. Let us take 1 or 2 examples. When we had the propane air explosion, that means liquid propane escaped from a pipe at Port Hudson in Missouri. It was a cold winter night. It was something like December 9, 1970. December is the cold month. The wind was quite low at around 2.5 to 3 meters per second, and therefore, the cloud of propane collected over the surface of the earth and it got drifted with the wind. The stability atmospheric stability was F. When we talked in terms of dispersion of natural gas in the largest man-made explosion, well, this was in Ural Mountain, this was in 1989, it was in June, a summer month. Well, this again gave an atmospheric stability. It was not a, it was a cloudy day perhaps. The atmospheric stability was C. That means an unsteady atmosphere compared to the steady atmosphere on this cold month. If we talk in our own country, the world's worst industrial disaster, namely the Bhopal gas tragedy, it happened on the night of December 2 to 3, just after midnight, 2 to 3, 1984. Cold day, well, not much wind. The atmosphere was stable between F to E, and therefore, being stable, well, the methyl isocyanide which leaked hugged to the ground, and it got transported by the wind, and it led to a number of deaths over here. We are interested in dispersion of hydrogen gas, formation of explosive, and therefore, yes, indeed, atmospheric dispersion and the atmospheric stability characteristics will influence it, and therefore, let us move forward from classification of the atmosphere into categories A to F to looking at the dispersion problem. Therefore, let's get back into the dispersion problem, and to be able to do that, well, we are interested in gas dispersing. That means we are looking at the concentration of gas due to some gradient or due to some movement. Well, it keeps changing. Rather, I am looking at concentration, and what we say, well, when I talk in terms of concentration gradient dC by dx, let us consider one dimensional geometry. Then I have something like a diffusion coefficient d. Because of a gradient, I have mass flux. That means I have concentration of some substance in a mixture, let us say 1, 1. Because of this gradient, there is some mass flux. Therefore, I am talking of concentration in terms of kilogram per meter cube, mass flux over here in terms of kilogram per meter square second, and the unit of this d, which is the diffusion coefficient, is meter square by second. When we talk of diffusion of gases, it is essentially due to gradient, but the turbulence, the convection and all that modify d to give it to be a turbulent or an eddy diffusivity. But let us just consider the molecular diffusivity and then extend it out. We want to find out, well, I want to find out what is the diffusivity of, let us say, a fuel gas in a mixture of fuel gas and air. That means 1 corresponds to fuel gas, maybe the mixture is 1 plus 2 over here, which is the, and we are considering the diffusion of 1 in the air mixture as it were. Therefore, let's formulate first a one-dimensional problem such that we understand it. Let us presume I have two stations here. This is my one-dimensional geometry along x. I have two stations here, station 1 at a distance x over here, in which maybe some gas is diffusing, and the gas which is diffusing, well, the gradient should be negative, and therefore, the mass which is moving must be negative. Therefore, I have diffusion coefficient into something like dC1 by dx, which is entering section 1. Let us say section 2 is a small distance dx away. The thing which is leaving now is, well, it is equal to, let us write this out, this becomes equal to minus d of del c by del x, del c1 by del x. Now, I have in a small thing some additional changes are taking place. Therefore, del by del x of d of del c1 by del x into dx, well, this is what is moving out, and therefore, I find something has moved out, and therefore, in this particular volume, now I am considering only the flux. Therefore, my area of cross section is unity 1 meter square, or let us say unit cross section, and therefore, this volume corresponds to unity into dx. In dx, what is going to happen? Well, the concentration, so much C kilogram per meter cube, what is going to happen? Well, this is going to change because something has moved out, and therefore, what is it I get? I have dC by dt in the particular volume. This is the rate of change of mass over here, is equal to, let us say, dc1 is equal to what has moved out, and now this is decreasing, therefore minus dc1 by dt into dx. Well, I have x also, therefore let us make it partial, dou c1 by dou t of dx is equal to what has moved out is minus d, because this minus this gives me the value. I have d into d squared c1 by dou x squared into dx, or rather this gets cancelled. I get my equation for diffusion as equal to dc by dt is equal to d into d squared c by dx squared. This is going to be my basic equation, which says how the fuel gas 1 diffuses in a mixture of air and fuel, where d is the diffusion coefficient. I again repeat, concentration is in kilograms per meter cube, d is in meter squared by second, which is the diffusivity. I need to solve this equation to be able to get how it diffuses, and I want to solve this under different atmospheric conditions, and this is what I want to do. To be able to solve this, now unfortunately I find it is not a single variable dx involved, it is also time involved, and therefore I just from dimensional considerations I would like to make this equation as a function of a single variable. Well, I find d has units, we just now said d has units of meter square by second, concentration has units, we said, is equal to kilogram per meter cube, x has units, that is diffusion in one dimension, has units of meter. You know, if I take a look to express x and t as a single variable, I find, well, if I have d, that means meter square by second, multiplied by time gives me second. That means I am talking of dt has units of x square, x or meter square, x square has units of meter square. Therefore, I can consider from dimensional considerations a unit like, let us say, x square by dt is something which the way I express the variation of x and t to be included in this particular equation, or rather I can define a new variable eta as equal to x by under root dt. Therefore, I introduce this variable because from dimensional considerations I expect the relationship between time and x to be of this particular form. I introduce this eta in this equation and I quickly solve this equation, and this is what I do in the next few slides which I show here. Well, we have the diffusion equation del C by del T is equal to d del square C by del x square, and what are the initial conditions? Well, at x is equal to 0 I have initial concentration, at time t is equal to 0 I have the initial concentration, and this concentration gets diffused, and very far away from x, well, the concentration of the particular substance which I am interested in is 0, maybe a fuel gas substance. Therefore, I want to solve this equation, and as I just now said, well, I have both x and t in this equation. I relate them as eta is equal to x by dt, and therefore, I write dc by dt as equal to, now dc by dt can be written as dc by d eta into d eta by dt. Now, d eta by dt I can write in terms, now this is the variable over here, therefore, d eta by dt is equal to x divided by under root d into t to the power with a negative sign t to the power 3 by 2, or rather I now bring t to the power 3 by 2, that is minus 3 by 2, I bring t here, I bring t half over here, it becomes minus x divided by 2t into under root dt, dc by d eta is a value of dc by dt on the left hand side, and similarly I get I want to determine d squared c by dx square, dc by dx is equal to dc by d eta into d eta by dx, d eta by dx is equal to 1 over under root dt, and again if I were to say d squared c by dx squared is dou by dou x into dc by dx, which is equal to d by dx of 1 over dt into dc by d eta, and that becomes equal to 1 over dt into d squared c by d eta square. Therefore, this particular equation can be written in terms of a single variable, instead of having t and x over here, can be written in the form of d squared c by d eta square is equal to minus eta by 2. How did minus eta come? We go back, we find, yes, d squared c becomes 1 over dt into d squared c by d eta square. I have in this particular equation dc by dt is equal to 1 over x over 2t into this into dc by dx. I am now substituting the value of dc by dt over here in terms of dc by d eta. I substitute d squared t by dx square as equal to 1 over dt, d and d gets cancelled. I have 1 over t into d squared c by d eta square. This t and t also gets cancelled. I am left with only x by 2 delta t, and that is the reason I get this particular equation del squared c by del eta square is equal to minus eta by 2 into del c by del eta. And putting the conditions, initial condition at x is equal to 0, eta is equal to 0, the initial concentration, and far from the surface eta is equal to infinity, the concentration is 0. I have to solve this equation. I immediately observe I can write del squared c by del eta square as equal to d of dc by d eta over here. That means this becomes d squared c by d eta square. And now what is it I observe? D of ln, if I were to take it, I have eta by 2 into d eta. That means what I do is I again write this equation as d squared c by d eta square divided by dc by d eta is equal to minus eta by 2, and then I have d by d eta giving me d squared c by d eta square, and therefore I have d of dc by d eta divided by dc by d eta is equal to minus eta by 2 into d eta, which came from the d eta over here. I integrate this and I find this is a ln form. I have ln of dc by d eta, this particular expression, as equal to minus eta squared by 4 plus a constant, and or rather I get dc by d eta taking exponential on both sides as equal to constant gets soaked with this. I have c1 e to the power minus eta squared by 4. Therefore, the moment I get c1 eta squared by 4, well, I need the concentration, how the concentration of the fuel gas changes. I integrate this and I get c1 into integral eta squared by 4 d eta, and I have plus c2 over here. I have a constant of integration over here, and what happens is I put the boundary condition at eta is equal to infinity. I have the concentration is equal to 0, and therefore the integral 0 to infinity e to the power eta squared by 4 d eta is equal to under root pi by 2. This gives me the value of this constant c1, and I get c1 is equal to minus 2 pi by ci, and since I get c1, I now write the concentration C is equal to, I get the value ci minus the value what I get here, that means 2 over pi, that means c1 is equal to minus 2 over root pi into ci, therefore minus 2 pi over ci, this is equal to the value of c1 into this particular value, or the concentration is equal to ci minus 1 over 2 root pi ci into the integral 0 to u e to the power minus u squared du. In other words, the concentration follows the law C is equal to Ci of exponential minus, we know eta is equal to x over 2 under root dt, or eta square is equal to x by 2 x by under root dt square. We have 4 here, therefore it becomes 2, it becomes x by 2 under root dt square. Well, this is the type of distribution you get for concentration, or rather we tell, well, the initial concentration is Ci. As x squared by dt increases, it follows a slope like this, and this is an exponential distribution. In other words, if I have a bell shape, I will have a bell shape like this. It follows the right hand part of the bell, and this is the exponential distribution. We also know that if I talk in terms of probability distribution, we say probability distribution Pw is equal to 1 over root pi into the standard deviation sigma w, or sigma, into exponential minus w squared by 2 sigma squared. This is the probability distribution fraction Pw. And what is this probability distribution? I show it in this particular figure. I have the dummy variable w along the x axis, the probability distribution fraction Pw on the y axis, And what does it denote? Well, it shows, well, this is the type of distribution, and the area under the distribution from minus infinity to infinity of the dummy variable is equal to 1, that is minus infinity to infinity of the integral Pw dw is equal to 1, and therefore, this area is 1. And what does the standard deviation denote? Well, it denotes what is the width of this particular distribution. Maybe the whole area is 1. If it diffuses more, well, the curve could be here, the standard deviation could be more. Therefore, standard deviation to some extent, whenever we are talking of probability distribution, tells us, what is the peak value of Pw. I could have a distribution which is like this, for which also the area is 1. Therefore, the standard deviation tells us how much is it the dispersion is taking place, or rather, if I were to just take a look at standard deviation, I say, well, I have from minus sigma to sigma, the area under this curve is something like 68.3. If I consider something like minus 2 sigma to plus 2 sigma, the area under this curve is something like 95.7% of the total area. And if I consider right from here, that is 3 sigma to minus 3 sigma to plus 3 sigma, the total area under this curve is something like 99.7. Therefore, I have several, that is 1 sigma, 2 sigma, 3 sigma, and this shows what is the area under this curve. And now, if I were to take a look at, I go back to the previous slide, I go back and take a look at probability distribution and compare it with something like the bell-shaped distribution what I get on dispersion. What is it I find? Well, I find, well, in the atmosphere I have fluctuations, just like I have fluctuations of the dummy variable, and the dummy variable, that is the value of, if I were to say the probability distribution fraction Pw is given by 1 over 2 pi into the standard deviation exponential. What did we get when we had the diffusion of the vapor? I had Ci exponential x over 2 dt. If I can take the value of sigma square is equal to dt over here, well, this becomes x by 2 sigma square. That means I am talking of exponential minus x square by 2 sigma square, and maybe the dispersion of the gases is able to tell me that means the standard deviation what I get is able to tell me how the dispersion of the gases is going to take a look, because the moment I can get the value of my standard deviation, I know how the diffusion takes place. Now, let me slightly quantify this before I go forward. All what we are saying is, we are trying to say, well, there is a gas which diffuses in the atmosphere, and if something is diffusing in the atmosphere, what is happening is, maybe initially the gas is let us say the gas is all at this particular point. After some time the gas diffuses out. When it diffuses out still further after some time, well, it diffuses out like this. Well, after a still longer time, well, the gas diffuses out still further. When I am looking at this particular probability distribution, when I say P of W with respect to W, I find, well, P of W is very similar to what I am talking in terms of concentration as a function of the x value over here, and therefore, now in this case, well, the standard deviation for the curve which corresponds to an initial time, well, this is the dispersion what I get, standard deviation. When it diffuses out still further, well, this is my value of minus sigma over here, this is my value of plus sigma over here. When it diffuses out still further, what is going to happen? Well, this becomes my minus sigma above the mean, and this becomes sort of plus sigma about the mean. Therefore, if I can evaluate the value of sigma, well, I can sort of evaluate my concentration, and this is how we evaluate concentrations. Therefore, we find that if I have something like an initial mass at t is equal to 0, x is equal to 0 as q, and I find, well, in this case also the total mass is conserved. If the mass is q, then Cx dx from minus infinity is q. Therefore, we have corresponding to minus infinity to infinity of p w dw is equal to 1, we have this equation, and therefore, we find if I can experimentally measure my standard deviations, then I can determine the value of concentration as a function of eta or as a function of x and t. Well, this is what is done. Therefore, you have concentration as a function of mass release, as a function of deviation, the standard deviation, and these standard deviations are measured, and this is for one dimension. If I just extrapolate to 3 dimensions, well, I have 3 dimensions. Now, I have standard deviation along x, namely sigma x, standard deviation along y, sigma y, standard deviation along z, sigma z, into exponential of, in addition to x, I have y square and 2 sigma y square, with the result that the concentration at any x, y, z into dx dy is the total mass, and this is what we use to solve the dispersion relations in different atmospheres. What I do in the next class is, having said that it is possible to use the probability theory to be able to solve the diffusion under different atmospheric conditions, and having specified the atmospheric stability criterion, all what we will take a look at is, we will try to take a look at a leak which keeps happening at constant rate, in which a plume of gas is formed. That means, we will take a plume of gas in which I have constant leak rate. We will see what is the concentration which is formed. We will take something like a puff or a constant volume of gas which is released, which gets dispersed into the atmosphere. And the reference I have used for getting into atmospheric dispersion is, there is a nice handbook, namely Workbook of Atmospheric Dispersion Estimates. This was by Turner DB, and it is published by the US Environmental Protection Agency. The report number is AP26, it is from New Connecticut in 1970. Therefore, I will get into the details of how we work out the values of the concentration in the next class. Well, thank you.